All right, you guys, today I get to say welcome back to the Come On podcast, Cathy. I think you're I can only think of one other person that's been on the show twice. So I'm so excited that you're back. Welcome.
That's such a privilege to be one of those two people. Thank you for having me again.
It's so good when my team sent me an email and they're like, Cathy's coming out with a book. You've already had her on the show. Like, I don't know. And I was like, yes, immediately put her on. I loved talking to her so much. I would love the opportunity to do it again.
Oh, yay. Thanks,
Um,
Michelle.
so that leads me, I guess, to this new book that you have coming out in January 2025. If you guys are listening to this in real time as it publishes, that is on Tuesday. As a fellow mom of two girls, this hits a sweet spot, and you're ahead of me on the parenting journey. So I'm so grateful for all of your wisdom being poured out here and to learn more from you. But for the people who aren't so familiar with you and your work, will you just share a little bit about you and your work, and then maybe kind of the story? I know you were sharing a little bit with me before we hit record of how this book really came to be, because I know it's been on your heart for a hot minute.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I guess I'll just start with that. Way back when in my 20s, I was an elementary school teacher, and then I realized that I was focusing on kids' social and emotional awareness all the time, and we weren't getting a lot of math and English done. I was like, wait, maybe I like being with these kids, but maybe I
You
should be
might
doing
have been
something
ahead
else.
of your time. I feel like
I
you're onto
was
something.
honestly, I would sit after school with kids and it was never about their education. And that's what's so interesting too, is that's something I learned. My parents were both teachers. My aunt was a principal. My niece is now a teacher. Like, I come from a family of educators, and one of those secrets is, yes, we're there to teach them, basics, ABCs and everything, but a lot of it is connection and
Yeah.
communication and making sure these kids are doing okay mentally and emotionally. There's just this component that you can't get around.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a social worker. I think I was in school in Chicago when I was like 27. I loved it, knew I was doing the right thing, going into a more clinical focus. And then I ended up working at Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, which is our major, it used to be called Children's Memorial Hospital, which is our huge children's hospital in the city. And I worked in child psychiatry in the partial hospitalization unit. And that experience was, I was the clinical educator, but also a therapist. That's where the education came in. It was helpful that I had been a teacher because I could do a lot of different things on the unit. But I found working with so many different kids, and it was boys and girls, but
Yeah.
a lot of my clients tended to be the girls and working with their families. And what
Mm.
came out of that experience was the fact that these kids I was working with could really make some changes, and they understood the expectations and they wanted to do well.
Yeah.
But if nothing changed at home, then these kids would graduate, and I'm putting that in air quotes because after they were there for a while, they would graduate out of our program, they'd go home, and then they'd cycle back
Mm.
because nothing had really changed within the family dynamic. So that's when I shifted. I had gotten married by that time. I had my first daughter, and I decided I'm going to shift and work with parents instead of working with the kids who I know are like capable of making all these shifts. I was like, I'm going to start talking to parents, and I got my parent coaching certification, which was kind of new too. Nobody knew what that was, parent coaching. They actually did Chicago Tribune did like a whole article about me and like one other person saying, what is a coach? Now it's kind of mainstream, but this is, I think, 2005,
Wow.
so since then, I have been, coaching. I work as a therapist. I do have a private practice. And then my husband and I have a podcast called Zen Parenting Radio that we started in 2011. Again, before we,
You are just like pushing the envelope on like a forerunner in so many spaces.
I know. And that's why it's so funny that it's called Zen Parenting Radio. Like, some people are like, just leave off radio. We're like, no. That's what indicates how long we've been around.
We're paying homage to our roots.
Totally. I'm like, I'm not letting it go. It's very Gen X of me. So basically we did Zen Parenting Radio. We've been doing it. We do it every Tuesday. I think we've missed recording twice in 14 years. Isn't that
Stop.
crazy?
Wow.
When you live with your recording partner,
Just take it with you.
you figure it out. And so then we also have this conference that we do every year called the Zen Parenting Conference in Chicago, where we bring in a lot of people, a lot of speakers. And actually, we have our Zen Parenting Conference this month, January 24th, 25th. And not only, it's our last one. I have to be done. Like, we've done so many. And so we're bringing in Glenn Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket to sing on Friday night. I just am like, if I'm going to do it, I'm bringing in Toad the Wet Sprocket. So anyway, side note, but getting back to girls, everything I've done for the last couple decades, I've been working with moms. I have been working with them and their daughters. Now, occasionally I work with families who have sons, and my husband, he runs an international men's group. So I hear plenty about men and boys. It's not for lack of hearing the challenges that are happening with all the genders. But my focus has been teen girls and moms who have pre-adolescent and teen girls. And I also teach at a university here outside of Chicago. I'm in the social work program, sociology, criminology. So I teach social work classes, and 98% of my students are girls.
Yeah.
So women, I should say, young women.
Yeah.
And so my whole life has been talking to them. And then, as you said, Michelle, I have 3 daughters. So my world with my kids and their friends, I have been surrounded by their questions, their desires, what drives them crazy about their parents, the things that they wish that adults understood and would, the way that they'd love to be spoken to. And these are not like demanding things. These are not bratty, rebellious things. These are just parts of their dignity, where they want to be seen and understood and valued. And the first chapter in my book is actually called, "Can You Tell My Parents This?" Because that's what they've been saying to me for 15 years. Like, we get through a conversation and then they're like, "Okay, you get it. Can you go tell my parents this?" So this book is my offering to them to say, yes, I'll go tell your parents. So.
Wow. Okay. I can't wait to get into this. The book is called Restoring Our Girls, which I guess leads me to think that part of the premise is that there's been some sort of fracturing or breaking or something, right, that requires this restoration. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing up the title, because it was a bit of a struggle for me, to be honest with you, because I think in many, many ways, girls are very whole. They have all these different aspects of themselves that they understand and that they embrace and that they see and that they navigate. So this is less about, we just got to put them back together. Restoring to me is more of, let's establish a foundation for them so they can take that understanding of their wholeness and thrive. Because really, what the issue is this disconnection oftentimes with their parents, with adults, and with culture and society.
Yeah.
There is a difficulty in understanding the challenges that girls are facing, and a big difficulty in talking to them or allowing them to speak their needs. I don't believe, I love having this conversation, because there are things that are real, which is, I was noticing statistics right after COVID that there were a lot of there were a lot of articles. I can remember there was one in the Washington Post. I think there was one, I'm not quite sure. I was going to say the Atlantic, but another major publication that was talking about the mental wellness of girls specifically, and that they had seen a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression, and a lot more eating disorders and all sorts of issues. And that it was higher levels than boys. It was, when they looked at it statistically, girls had taken a real hit since COVID. But then when I look back on the stats, they were already increasing before COVID.
Wow.
So there was something getting missed. And that's not shocking to me. I'm a 53-year-old woman. I've lived in this world, and things get missed, things get overlooked. Their society is not as focused on the needs of women, and there's a lot of things that sometimes we take data, and we say, oh, more girls are going to college, good, we're done, we did it, everything's even and equal, and that's not the case. And so this was me sharing my experiences. We don't need to have a power struggle between who needs support more. Boys need support as well. Men need support. Women need support. But this is my area of expertise. This is what I can help in, and I can talk about what I've seen and what I know.
Wow. I'm so grateful that you're doing this work. And even in your mention of the people that you worked with that were like, can you tell my mom this, or could you tell my parents that? I can relate to that so much. Not yet, I think, in my parenting journey, because my kids are 6 and 7, but when I was a teenager. And I remember I really struggled with my mental health in, like, I don't remember what year it was, junior year, maybe sophomore, junior year. But I went to see a therapist, and I remember it was the same thing. Like, finally, someone that I just felt like I could actually be honest with, that got it, that I felt like wasn't judging me, or I wouldn't get into trouble. And I remember that yearning, like, man, I wish I could just tell my parents this and have it received in the same way. And I know that your approach and a lot of what you write about in this book is kind of different than what maybe we've heard about communicating with our girls. And I would love to hear a little bit about, your take on it, based on your own experience and what you've just seen professionally.
Yeah, I start the beginning of the book is obviously an introduction into why all these things we're discussing, with a lot of stories that I heard from girls and my own daughters. But the real core of the beginning is a guide to conversations with our girls. And I definitely chose the word guide on purpose, because this is not a book where it's like, do this, say this.
Not a script.
No, there is no script. And I can't, I'm one of those people, I've written a few parenting books, and I can't stand parenting books when they're so directive and they're like, say this thing, because I don't mean to make fun of people who write them, but that's not human.
No.
There's something about that and I'll tell you what the girls tell me about those things. They'll be like, my mom's reading another book. I can tell.
You can sense it. Yep.
I can totally sense it. Oh, my mom watched a TV show.
Yeah.
My mom. And sometimes it's not just about learning how to parent. Sometimes they're, and I'm focusing on moms because that's mostly what they comment about. But they'll be like, she's watching these like documentaries again, and now she's worried about where I'm going, and she's afraid for anything we absorb and bring in, we sometimes apply to our kids. So the guide is really more about these bigger concepts, and I try and make it applicable. Like, I try and make it hands-on of giving examples. But what I believe is that we all have the capability to have these conversations, but we have to use our own personalities, our own understandings of our girls. Because I have 3 daughters. They're all from Todd and I. We've lived in the same house since they were born, and they're completely different people. So I cannot.
Which is so awesome and so frustrating all at the same
crazy.
time.
They all look, you can see we're all related, but they all look different. They all act different. They all need different things.
Yes.
And Todd and I we totally vibe with that. We're like, okay, with this one, this is, gentle voices and more questions. And this one, solid answers. This, what they want.
Love that. Mm-hmm.
And that's it right there. Knowing your kids.
Yeah.
Conversations, like, I think the misconception is when we say conversations, everybody thinks, oh, a sex ed talk, or let's talk about vaping.
Let's sit down.
Drugs. Yeah. Right. Let's sit down.
Yeah.
I'm saying let's have conversations with our kids so we know them.
Yeah.
So we have some humor with them. So we have some understanding of what they need and who they are. So we're not applying our history or our expectations on them and saying, you need to be like me. I was a swimmer. Go be a swimmer like me. And, don't you have a big group of friends? Don't you want to be with, 10 people instead of just 2? We apply a lot of these experiences from our childhood or lack of experiences and put them on our kids, which is really heavy. And this is what they struggle with the most. And what they end up doing is either one of 2 things. Okay. They either rebel against it, which is, oh my God, I can't stand you guys. Yeah. Which we normalize too much in this culture where we're like, oh, my teen hates me. Well, I'm like, no, not well. That's a relationship. You want to or they go the other way and they become very quiet and they comply, which means that they're going to do whatever you want them to do in the home, but their real selves, that's being shared with their peers, maybe their coach, maybe teachers, but you don't know them because they've just learned to comply for you, to say the things that they want you to say. And so there's a disconnect there. So why that's so important is then when something does happen, because it will, your children will have challenges, especially, no matter what age. But as they get into because this book is really the challenges that come up from 12 to 25, because it's Gen Z girls that I've really been talking to for the last, decade or so. Mm-hmm. If you have that, connection established where you talk about Taylor Swift and Gracie Abrams, and you talk about the issues going on in the world, and you talk about what's on TV and the TV show you just watched and the movie you went to, then it's so much easier for them to talk to you about their pain
Mm.
because they trust you. You know how
Yeah.
to, they're used to talking with you. But we still have this top-down model of we think parenting is this like power over. And
Mhm.
so we feel like that's what keeps things under control. And I'm putting that in air quotes because
Yeah.
you can't control humans. We can be with humans and we can guide humans and we can love them. But to believe that they're just going to accommodate everything that we think they should, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. And I'm kind of what I was thinking of while you were saying that too is the credibility.
Yes.
Right? Like even in
Great word.
trying to control, I remember myself as a teen girl, like the minute I sensed that, I would just check out and I'd be like rolling my eyes or whatever
Totally.
I wanted to do, right?
Totally. Michelle, one of the things that girls tell me all the time that drives them crazy, and I write about this, is how their parents are with them and then how their parents are when maybe they're at the grocery store and they see other people, or when someone
Oh,
comes to the
yeah.
door, or at a school event, where with them, they're like, have you done your homework? Have you done this? You're late. You need to do this. And all of a sudden they walk in and they see other parents and they're like, hello, how are you? And kids are like, their daughters are like,
No.
what are you doing?
Yeah, the BS radar
It's
is
just off
zinging.
the charts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here's the thing that's so interesting. I have a little bit of that because I'm tend to be more introverted. And so
Okay.
like sometimes I have to like gear up for these like PTA functions, you know what I mean? Like I have to like gear up. And so there is another level, but I totally own it. The girls
Yeah.
know. They're like, are you gearing up? I'm like, I'm so gearing up. Like, I'm like, I need to take a walk. I'm going to, curl my hair and I'm going to do it. So we do it. They watch me with more like acceptance and
Yeah.
humor.
There's a
Then
transparency
you
there.
got it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to, I want to be like very clear about who I am with the people I love most.
Yeah.
And again, I like to use humor with my
Yeah.
girls. It's been very helpful with parenting. And my husband's he's very funny too. So he's very helpful to me. He keeps me more balanced. I'm more of the
Yeah.
anxious one.
Okay.
But I talk about that with the girls. Even anxiety runs through our family.
Yeah.
Let's just own it. Like, this is what
Yeah.
it looks like. Addiction runs through our family. My sister-in-law's been in recovery 20 years. We talk about it all the time. She comes over, she tells them her stories. She's like, listen, you
Mm.
don't want to get yourself, this is what I mean about conversation. It's about being almost at having conversations that are more peer to peer
Yes.
than parent to child. You are in a different stage. Like, you can start this process. Obviously, you probably already do, Michelle, but it feels different when they're that young. But when they get to be 11 or 12, they start to ask for it in many
Mhm.
ways. And it's our work to start to shift in a way where they can hear us with their new brain,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the vulnerability in that because I
Yeah.
just think that breeds so much trust. And I also love hearing you talk about the power of using humor
Yeah.
with our older kids because I think it's easy to access that with like a toddler or maybe a
Yeah.
5-year-old. But the thought of using humor with a 17-year-old feels different.
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
and that's their language, right? They're a little more cynical, they're a little more jaded, and not inherently like
Right.
that'll decrease. That's how they come off because
Yeah.
it's a little more defensive you know, and that's the other thing is you got to be clear about where they are in their lives. You have to know about the craziness going on in their brain as far as everything that's firing and the hormones that are going through and the changes that are happening, not as so we can blow them off and be like, ugh, they're just so difficult. But so
Yeah.
we understand that days can be very difficult, that they can
Yeah.
fluctuate between a lot of moods, that we can be annoying sometimes as parents, and we can
Sure.
be focused on things that are not important to them.
Yeah.
And when they say things to us like that, like, gosh, you just seem so hung up about this, instead of being like giving them a lecture about why we are, to say, you know what? Tell me about that. What am I doing? Like, tell me, am I really like totally putting this on you? And they're like, yes. And you're like, okay, let me back up for a second. I'm way too focused on this class right now. And you're right. I trust you. I know you know what you're doing. Come to me if you need it. I'm out. Like,
Wow.
we can have that. And then when they struggle, they come and say,
Mhm.
now I need the help. Because
Mm.
the key in all of this we're talking about is the non-judgment,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
can be really hard because we as the parents, we're very scared they're almost like our appendage where we feel like they're a part of us. And so we're like, why don't you do this? And why don't you do this? And one of the hints that I always give to parents is, if you have nieces and nephews, or, if you're older and you have grandchildren already, which, you and I do not have yet, but how would you be with these kids?
Yeah,
Would
it's
you
different.
be this overbearing, or would you just be like, what's going on, girl?
Yeah.
How you doing? Let's sit down and talk about it. Let's get, forget that, drop that. Let's go talk. But as parents, we don't utilize that skill enough with our kids. We feel like we shouldn't be friendly to them, that we should almost be jerks. Like some
Oh,
parents really believe they need to be hard on their kids all the time, and nothing comes of that.
uh-uh.
It's a disconnection. It makes our kids have an inner dialogue that's more like critical.
Yeah.
It makes them not want to be with us.
Yeah.
And then when they get older, they don't want to come home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, exactly. And so much of it builds their inner voice, right? It's
Right.
like, yeah, how they're hearing us speak to and about them is how they're going to start hearing their own thoughts about themselves.
That's right.
It's so good. I want to ask and hear, because I know a lot of your work in this book and otherwise is about really teaching our girls how to think and
Yes.
think critically and question things. Part of it probably goes back to even about raising or not wanting to raise compliant children and appreciating their questions and their pushback and all of these things. But teach us a little bit about why that's so important with our girls.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing. And actually, I was just telling you before, I like to write book proposals and come up with these ideas. And one of my book proposals from about 3 or 4 years ago was just about critical thinking, focusing on high control groups and even cults and
Okay.
abusive relationships, because I've had some. So these are things that I know it's kind of like a golden age for cults right now, and we're hearing all about them. And not everything is a cult per se. A lot of things are just like high control groups where people get absorbed into something and they can't see out of it. They only believe in either a dogma or a leader, or it becomes their life.
Yeah.
And I have experience with that. I've had emotionally abusive relationships. I had a desire, I was a kid who was super sensitive, and I just had all these thoughts and feelings and everything. And that's probably why I do what I do. It's not a big secret to me. I've done a lot of therapy myself, but, I kind of, moved into life and like kind of wanted that specialness. Like, what's special? What's different? I want to be with people who are special. And I became a yoga teacher. That's its whole thing. I
Yeah.
worked with a teacher who was very like, you can only work with me, only listen to me. And I did that for like 6 years. I was in groups that really had, that maybe the leaders, we were like, oh my God, they're so amazing. And then all of a sudden they would end up having sex with their students, stealing from other people, and there would just be this falling apart thing. So I had enough experience to see how oftentimes, and this is non-gender specific, but with girls especially, that's where I'm focusing, is that we can get pulled in without realizing red flags. And usually it's people who want to do good things. They want to have a healthy relationship. They want to help someone. They want to have a bigger purpose. They want to be seen as special. These are not bad things. The big but is we have to recognize, like, there's so many layers here, but like, first of all, the specialness, if we can create that in our own home with our girls, and it's not about you're more special than other people. That's not it. It's you are unique. Your things that you love are cool. The desires you have make sense. The road for you is limitless and up to you. And the same with everybody else.
Yes.
Right? So we don't have to pit kids against each other.
No.
So then there's an inherent sense of belonging already.
Yeah.
So these kids don't have to go out and find it elsewhere.
That's
So
right.
that's one stage.
Okay.
And then the second one is just talking about everything in the home and looking at many different sides of an issue, other people's perspective. Not where like a kid comes home and says, someone hurt my feelings, and we jump to, well, what did you do to make it happen? First things first is always their feelings. Tell me about what you experienced. What happened? Then we can start to broaden it out. What was going on with that kid? What did the teacher do? What do you think everyone was feeling? Why was it so anxiety provoking for you? And it doesn't have to happen all in the same conversation. Yeah. But normalizing this, because in my guide for conversations, the first one is widen your perspective. Just start to pull back and look at everything. And allow your kids to, have a different perspective. My girls, believe me, growing up, it's not that they want to be, well, no, they want to be contrarians sometimes. They do. If you like something, it's not always the greatest thing. Sometimes they jump back on. Like my girls are now 21, 19, and 17. So a lot of the things they've watched me love, they now love because they grew up with it, but they didn't really love it in the moment. They're like, Mom, you like Backstreet Boys? That's so cheesy. That's so bad. And now they're like, when they come back to Vegas, can we all go? I'm like, yes. Do you know what I mean? But
Yes.
that I myself I also had to hold on to myself, and be like, this is who I am. This is what I like.
Yep.
You have to have some self-awareness too.
Yeah.
And, but I also, we've been Taylor Swift people since they were little, and we've gone to every concert, every album that
I
has
love
come
seeing
out.
that on your social media. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know whenever the last tour was. I loved
we're
following
obsessed.
along. It was so good.
It is. And that's theirs, but that's Todd and I jumping into theirs. So there's a lot of back and forth.
I love that.
So I know it's like, well, how is that critical thinking? You're giving them, you're allowing them to have their own opinions. You're kind of helping them put their opinions up against other people and having empathy for other people's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
You're recognizing why people do what they do. You're not name calling or living in a binary, us versus them, or they are bad. There's an understanding of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that then, when things happen, when they're in a relationship that maybe starts to get uncomfortable, that they have a gut check about it.
Yeah.
They can come home and talk about it because, again, the non-judgmental, communication, like, Mom, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but this is how I feel. Or with that person, they push back and they say, that's not how I see it. Instead of, okay, whatever you want, whatever, which is an abusive relationship usually starts out awesome, where it's like love bombing and, gift buying. And even that, I'm like, red flag, no one can love you in a week. I love you, but no one should be saying they love you in a week. Anyway, I'll stop because I could go on, but it's a lot of, there's a big section in the book about that, because that's really important to me because of my own experiences, but because of what I've seen girls go through and their parents. They are worried about their parents who are involved in high control groups.
Wow.
So this is not just one way. This is like, how do we talk to people who think differently, who have different political motivations, who watch different news stations than we do? How do we make sure we stay connected and not, rage against each other, but also ask good questions about, fact and fiction?
Yeah. It's really just, like I'm hearing a lot of welcoming them into an area like of more exploration and more awareness and being slower, right? Like just taking our time in a lot of these things and noticing what's going on. I have like two questions kind of swirling around, and they might be the same question. One of them is, I would love to hear maybe what are some of the other things or trends or themes that you heard from a lot of these girls that they wish their parents knew. And then the other part of it is maybe what are some of the judgments that parents tend to pass without realizing that that's actually what they are. And I don't know if there's overlap. There's probably overlap there. But I would love for some parents that are listening to kind of have some light bulb moments around, maybe there's a better way for me to go about this.
Yes, they totally overlap. The section in the book right after the guide for having real conversations is called Real Things Our Girls Wish We Knew.
Okay.
And I, I'm like, I'm sorry to laugh. It was just really fun to write about. And everybody listening, I'm not saying I did this perfectly. Like, my girls gave me feedback on me. The last section of the book are 3 stories from my girls about their experiences. And some of them were pretty scary and significant, and how I responded to it. And it's not a rip on me necessarily, but it's how the things that I said and did that were helpful, the experiences they had where they felt like they could come to us or couldn't, like it's really insightful and really helpful to me. Like, this is what we talk about all the time. And they were like, we'll write something. I'm like, great, put it in the book. But the section before that is the things that we wish, the things that real girls say. And I broke them down into know me, connect with me, support me, trust me, and laugh with me. Okay. And underneath each of those sections are different things that they say. And each one became kind of an amalgam, because obviously every girl I work with says it differently. But like, under know me, the first one is let me tell you about me instead of you telling me about me. Right.
Yes.
So, connecting to your question about like, what parents do, we're so internally organizing about our kids where we're like, you're my smart one and you're my tall one and you're my late one and we're like telling them who they are. You're an amazing athlete. You always speak back to me. You're a pain in the butt. And we have all these like, we sometimes think they're like benign vocalizations, we're just like, oh, we're just saying things, but these are our kids. And so they're taking all of this information in as often fact, or we're very literal about it. Like you will dance and you will dance and then you will dance in college and then, or you will play soccer, and we tell them who they are instead of backing up and allowing them to say to us, this is what I like. And even we get so hung up, the whole grit culture thing kind of screwed us up. I believe in grit as in research and Angela Duckworth's research. I'm not questioning that, but we kind of hijacked it a little bit. And we were like, anything that our kids want to stop doing, they're not gritty. And it's like, well, wait a second here. If our kids, they're kids, if they play soccer for a little bit and then they're like, I'm done with that. It's baseball time. Or this summer, I want to just read books. Is that a problem?
Right.
But in our culture, we get very hung up on, you need to start when you're 4, you need to do this. And the stats of going to college with a scholarship in sports is very low, by the way. I have had a lot of people on our show talk about that stat. It's not so much. So a lot of times we'll say, but that's how they're going to pay for college. That's not really a thing either. So just, I'll just go back to what they said. Let me tell you about me. And then we can make decisions about what to do next, versus you telling me how my life's going to go. Because the other big one is, please don't compare your teen challenges to my teen challenges. We are from very different generations, and your experience might be interesting or enlightening, but it's not mine. And that's something parents do too. I played outside till the sun went down, and then I came home and nobody knew where I was. And I built forts in my basement and I wasn't bored. And we didn't have phones.
Exactly. No. And we could be outside until 10 p.m. and our parents didn't care. And even my kids were like, let me do that. I'd be like, no, actually, take it back.
I know. I mean, and that's the thing is I always talk about how we have our adult glasses on with our kids, and we're like, how, why wouldn't you do that? Or how did you not know that? Or why wouldn't you, do these things that I would do? And it's like, because they're not you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, especially the first one you were talking about, like, let me tell you about me or who I am or what I want you to know about me. I think a lot of times too, as a parent, not only is it like maybe benign, but it's actually very well intentioned on the parent side, right?
True.
Like, you're the smart one, you're the whatever. And I got that a lot growing up. Again, all well intentioned. And it took 35 years, I guess, until the pandemic for me to even have like the spaciousness to be like, I'm a lawyer and I don't like being a lawyer and I want to do something else. And I think like, as we put these things on our kids too, not only are we putting it on them, but we're also taking away the opportunity for them to figure out who it is that they are so they can express it, right? If we're just telling them who they are, it's almost like if they have a chance to tell us who they are from their perspective, they have to do an exploration and kind of figure out what they like and don't like and what lights them up and what makes them angry and all these different things.
Totally. And that is, this is an important core of, just parenting, or this book specifically, is the whole first couple chapters are about my work with the moms, because what we figure, and in my own personal, self-awareness journey, but we are doing so much unlearning in real time. We are unwinding all of these messages that were fed to us, either very individualistic messages from our family or our, culture, and then all of these things in school that we were told, and we're just unwinding and unwinding. But then a lot of times unconsciously, we apply the same stuff to our girls. And so we end up telling them things that maybe we wish we would know, like, for example, parents who are like, I was really shy. I don't want my daughter to be shy because shyness held me back and I'm not going to let her be shy, which I'm laughing because, what do you mean you're not going to let her be shy? Like, that's an experience she's having. And shyness can be what kind of helps you
I have
observe.
a whole thing about shyness too.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
And that's when they're young. You can only imagine how this looks in the teenage years,
right.
I want you to be dating. I want you to be out with big groups. I want you to be taking pictures at homecoming with 40 kids, and I'll set it up and I'll make the balloon arch and I'll make it, there's so much pressure to make things look a certain way, to fulfill the dream of the parent. And the parents, and I'm saying this with, I'm not making fun, but just like you said, these self-awareness things, they're still acting like they're in high school because they're still worried about the socialization of, I want to hang out with these people. Like one of the families I was working with 2 years ago, their kid was a hockey player, and hockey had become their social life, hanging out at the ice rink and going to all the social events. And their kid's like, I'm done with hockey. He'd been hit, his head had been hit. He was done. He wanted to do some different things in school. He wanted to fish. He was like, I just want to do these basic things. And the parents were more worried about their lives.
They were so tied up in it.
Exactly. And so that's not for me to shame parents. This is self-awareness. Like, oh, wait, I'm pushing this because I want it.
Yeah.
And that is a aha rather than I feel so bad. Like, I love ahas. I don't care if they're, that's all we can do.
Yeah.
That's what kids wake us up to is ourselves, right?
Oh,
the whole thing is a mirror. So, there's no judgment in my therapy office. It's right over there. So that's why I keep pointing it. I'm like, dude, I've been there. I have recognized what I've said or done and seen how it was for me and not for them. And then that's how we learn. It's a dance, you know?
Yeah, it's revelation.
It is.
One of the big ones for me, and I've talked about this quite a bit on the show, it's like I guess it's not a stupid little thing because I think it's actually important. But I realized that even when my kids were in like kindergarten and first grade, I'd pick them up and every Friday they had a spelling test. And the first thing I was asking them was like, hey, how'd the spelling test go? And like, thank God I caught the revelation like just a couple weeks in, but I'm like, I am going to stop doing this because this is not even about them and anything with their confidence, academic success, whatever. It's like, it's something with me, right? That like, this is an achievement thing or like a reflection on me thing or an insecurity thing for me. And I know there's still so many more that they're going to teach me and bring to life for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes for parents, it's just small talk. They're just like the kids get in the car and it's like, so how was your day? How was that test? And they're not, sometimes it has an energy behind it where the kids can feel it like, you want me to ace it, don't you? Like they know they can read you. That's the other thing the girls always say. They're like, I know what my mom's doing. I know what my dad's doing. Like they're so on to us that it's a joke to think we're like getting away with anything. And then sometimes it really is that like fear of them falling behind or not being good enough. And really that's us. That's work. Being like, and when your kids have had enough challenges, failures, or anything significant when it comes to physical health or mental health or, something very scary in their life, those things start to diminish because you start to have a bigger picture of what do I really want for my kid, which is, I just want them to be, and the whole thing of happy, that doesn't make sense because that's just one feeling. I just want them to feel good in their skin. I want them to know that they're loved. I want them to know when they have bad days, they can come back from it. There is no linear path.
That's right.
This is what's so great for me as a college professor is that, my students come to me and they're like, well, how do I get this or do this or do this? And I don't know. There is no exact path. You just have to try things and check out a job and, get network a little bit and things evolve. And then in hindsight, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Right. But just trust that whatever happens, you're going to be equipped.
You're going to be
resourceful enough. Yeah.
And isn't that, the conversations at home, then it's less about, to your point, it's less about the score you got on your spelling test. IQ is not what makes us in the world. It's all EQ. It's how do we relate to ourselves and other people. And IQ can be interesting, someone has to be a national merit scholar and let's celebrate that, but not every kid is supposed to be.
Right.
And, do you see your kids' skill set? Do you see where they shine and what they love? And that not everything is competitive. I had a daughter who took pictures and had this Instagram page where she would just post pictures. It had nothing to do with competing. It had nothing to do with anything against anybody else. And it was beautiful. And she loved it. And so instead we ask questions like, do you put up any new pictures I can see? Like you engage with them in the things they love instead of the things that they feel pressure around already.
Wow. To just be able to enjoy it together.
Yes.
What a gift.
I know.
Okay, I have one other question that I want to
Yes.
ask you, and I don't know if this has anything to do with your book, but just as a mom of older girls or older children now, um, especially when mine were much younger, and then even now when they're 6 and 7, sometimes I notice myself getting worked up about certain things or like really focusing on certain things. And I kind of have to take a step back and remind myself that my vision is skewed right now because I just know what I know in the moment, right? And I wonder for the moms listening who have younger children, if you could share some of those moments you can remember of like things that you thought were really important at the time, or maybe even the opposite. And as you've seen it kind of play out and your kids grow, that you look back and you're like, wow, I guess I didn't really need to spend as much time thinking about or worrying about all of this, these different things, that we might be able to spend less time on and really focus on the things that matter in raising our kids.
When you say that, like the first thing that comes to mind for me is waking up at like 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning to make sure my kids could get into certain camps. Meaning that
Okay.
the sign up was like at 6
Yes.
in the morning and you're like in a robe and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, summer camps are about to open and my kid has got to be in this thing.
Yep.
And will they, be on the wait list and then and it's so funny, Michelle, because the thing is it's now a total joke to me on myself. It's like, wow, you were like hyper focused. But in the moment, to
Felt
your point,
important.
you're like they, if we had to work, they needed to be in this camp, or there was a reality behind it.
Yep.
But maybe there's less like I'll say another one that I actually am happy about that I did, but in the moment I was really like uncomfortable. I was very focused, obviously, on my girls' emotional well-being, and when they were afraid of something, I was very like, okay, let's deal with it. And
Yeah.
there was like a ballet class that my two olders were in together. And they didn't want me to leave. And I was like, okay. And the teacher was like, leave. And I was like, but my girls don't want me to leave. I'm just going to sit in this corner. And she's like, we don't have parents do that. I don't like it. I understand why, but I'm also kind of like, these girls are telling me don't leave.
Yeah.
And this is their first class. And again, that's the thing is inside of me. I know I'm a therapist. I'm a teacher. I'm not worried about that. They'll never listen to another authority. Like a lot of the
Right.
things that people worry about,
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about. And so I
Yeah.
sat in that classroom on the floor and I knew the teacher hated me and I felt like an idiot.
Oh,
I did the same thing when the girls like wanted me to go back with them in the dentist's office,
yeah.
and they would be like, don't let me just go back there alone. I'm like, I have to go. And I'd be like, I'll go back there with you. And the dentist would be like, there's no chair for you. And I'm like, I'll sit on the floor. And there was these things where they didn't need that all the time.
Yeah.
They all went through a little social anxiety like all kids
Mhm.
do, but there was what my end goal was, even though I was so uncomfortable in the moment,
Yeah.
was I'm here for you. I
That's
got
it.
your back.
Yeah.
If I told you I was going to sit there, I'm going to sit there. There were also times that I couldn't, and I
Mhm.
had to talk them through it or apologize for dropping the ball. Like a
Mm.
big part of the guide to conversations is knowing when to repair and apologize and take ownership of the things you do that hurt your kids.
Mm.
Sometimes you don't even know you've hurt them and they come to you and they say, you really embarrassed me. And instead of questioning them about, no, I didn't, or what do you mean? Or can't you take a joke? Just say, I am so sorry. I
Yeah.
would never intentionally hurt you or embarrass you. And I want to learn from this. Or tell me what I did. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Like, it's not that I followed through with my kids every single second. It's that when I could, I did.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't, I took ownership.
Yeah.
And I was very human. Like there was no,
Yes. Yeah.
I have many things that I'm like, oh geez. But to your question, I was embarrassed and I thought, oh, is this going to go on forever? And I'm just so glad I did those things now. Like
Yeah.
it didn't go on forever. And it was, now it's so silly in hindsight. It's the teeniest thing. But I was all hyped up and what I'll say to kind of sum all this up is that the more you're able to connect with your kids in all these ways where they trust you and they can talk to you and you do have some, humor with them and they know who you are and you know who they are, the less other challenges you'll face. It doesn't mean that life doesn't happen. People
Yeah.
die, like families have challenges. There's hurricanes, like they'll still have challenges, but
Yes.
that internal angst in the home that people talk about with teenagers, that wasn't our experience. That wasn't what it does. My girls had issues, but it wasn't us against them. We were all in it together. And
Oh,
that's kind of my hope for people, is that you can't keep away from challenges, but you can do it as a team.
yeah. And it does bring so much hope. And I just love that you
Yes.
push back against the narrative of, what we usually hear about teenagers or,
Yes.
more closer to my world. It's like what I heard about, terrible twos and a three-nager. I'm like, not in my house. I love my 2-year-old.
I
Like,
know.
do they irritate me sometimes? Of course they do. They're
Of
human
course.
beings and they're trying to figure out this whole thing. But like, I'm not going to just adopt that and allow that to settle in here. And I just love that you're helping moms do that with their teens.
It can be the best time, like a time where your kids are like so interested in so much and they do come to you. And sometimes it's a lot, it can be
Sure.
like, whoa, these are some big issues. Like, it's not easy. I've needed my own therapy and my own friends and a good relationship with my husband to work it through. But my fear, the thing I hear way too much, is my teen is going to hate me when they're a teenager, but someday they'll be 25 and they'll come back and
Come
thank
back
me,
around. Yeah.
and they'll come back around. And what I say to moms who say that to me is, you missed all those years.
Yeah.
And what effect has that had? And again, this is when they say it in the moment. I don't shame them when they're already 25, but
Yeah.
it's like, why would you just throw in the towel and say, well, they're going to hate me? Maybe question, why do they hate you?
Yeah.
What's the thing that's happening? And they're not a bunch of ogres where they're like my way or the highway. They want a relationship.
Yeah.
So when our kids are telling us, you embarrass me, or I'm angry with you, or I hate you, instead of, oh, you're so disrespectful, what about, why? What can I do to make this relationship feel more comfortable for both of us? Like, work on it,
Yeah.
make it, I can't think of anything more important than the relationships in our lives.
Yeah.
So
I hear in this so much of a shift from assumptions and judgment to curiosity.
yes, that's the word. That's the word. And that is the word with everything, with the conversations you're
Yeah.
having with your kids, curiosity about them,
Mhm.
curiosity about their interests, curiosity about why they're acting a certain way, curiosity about yourself, why you're responding a certain way.
Yeah.
Instead of it all being about them, they made me feel this way, they're frustrating me. Instead, it's about, why am I frustrated? You know, why is this really hitting? Because we all have our triggers, to your point, spelling test or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
When you were the kid who was the smart kid, and the benefits of that. So you're kind of like, that would be cool if they had that too, or their little me. I'm not going to speak your truth. You know
Yeah.
for
Yep.
yourself what that means.
Yep.
And I had my own stuff like that.
Mhm.
And then we try and recreate this experience we had. Or, Michelle, we swing all the way to the other side and we say, I'm going to do nothing like my childhood.
Right.
But guess what? That's still about us,
Yeah. It is.
right?
Yeah.
So we're still focused on us. So curiosity is a beautiful word.
So good. I feel like I could learn from you all day long.
Mm,
Talk all day long. There's so much wisdom in that, and it's rooted in so much empathy and compassion.
yeah.
And the through line is just you're being real. And I
Yes.
think that just the authenticity, like parent doesn't have to be this like, robe we put on in the morning and it's like, now I'm going to be the parent. It's like,
Right.
no, it doesn't have to
Right.
be like that.
It isn't. And, it is a role, but we don't have to be the role. We just
Yeah.
sometimes have to inhabit it. Like,
Yep.
I'm your parent. I have to do this thing. I have to tell you if you have something in your teeth. When I have said that to my girls, like in the phases where they needed to like take a shower or whatever, I would just say that. I'd say, my role in your life is I have to tell you to take a shower, because that's my job. And I know you don't want me to. So I didn't say, you stink and you blah, blah. I was not cruel.
Yeah.
I utilized my role to remind them, and they didn't always like it.
Yeah.
We have to also have a teeny bit of, I don't want to call it armor, but we have to understand, not take everything so,
A little separation. Yeah.
not get
Yeah.
so offended by our kids.
Mhm.
They are kids,
Mhm.
and part of their development is to push back
Yeah.
on people and adults, especially
Yeah.
because they're trying to figure out their own, like you said, terrible twos. I do it myself. There's another version of that at 13 or 14 where it's like, I do it myself. And that they're saying, I need more space. They're saying, I need you to back off a little. Then that's when we know we have a different role. Now I'm support system instead of the one who does it for them. So, it is a process of growing awareness and patience and humility, a lot of humility and humor, And remembering common humanity. You're not alone. Aren't we all doing this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And the lifelong journey together, right? What an investment in those 18 years or whatever it is that you live in close proximity. But then you get to reap the benefit of all of that for so long.
It's the best. I mean, I loved every stage. I didn't love baby stage that much, but I loved most of the stages. And because baby stage was hard for me, like they couldn't talk. I was like, what's wrong with you? But now, oh my God, we have so much fun. Like we go out and I go to their college and we go out to dinner and we have big talks and we text each other things all the time. It's like, it's the best. And I don't want people to miss that with their kids. You know, there's too much estrangement right now. There's too much anger. You know, I just think there's such another way. And I will say this, Michelle, because I know we're probably wrapping up here, is that this book, one of the things I love about it is if you get it, ask your girls if the things in it that I wrote are true. Wow. Meaning the know me, that go through the things that, because they're from these girls.
Would it be cool to read it together?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I actually say in the introduction, you know, girls, this is maybe for you to give to your parents, or parents, this is for you to read, and then ask your girls, like, these things they say, like, you know, let me tell you about me instead of you telling me about me, or can we laugh sometimes? Like girls are always like, can we laugh? You know, can we laugh at home? Why does everything have to be so serious? Ask them, you know, to look at some of those. They don't have to read the whole book, but I've got them pretty, you know, clean and clear. And even if they say no, because obviously it's not going to be every kid that agrees with every single one, but then what are theirs?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, it opens the door. So that's been kind of fun because I've given the book now to my daughter's friends and stuff. And I'm like, you know, they're like, this one, you know, it's fun to hear them say it. So
yes. Yeah. I'm going to pick up my copies. I love that so much. Let everyone know it's coming out next week. If you're listening in real time, January 14, 2025.
Yes.
I'm assuming they can get it at all major retailers everywhere. Yeah. Tell us all the things.
Okay. All the places. Yes. And thank you. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you for talking to me about these things. And I'm just excited. As I said to you before we started, I love everything I write and I love the podcast, but this book is very close to my heart and I feel very grounded in it. This is a lot of personal and professional experience and I feel good about sharing it. I feel like it's going to be very helpful.
It is. It's going to have a huge impact. Yeah. It's going to make a big difference. I'm so grateful for you. Beautiful. All right, you guys, I'll put the link in the show notes for the book. Pick it up, read it. I have younger kids. Maybe if you're like me, grab it, read it. So maybe we can kind of like get ahead of some of this before our children. We can start practicing it. We can start these conversations. So they're not coming out of left field the minute that our kids become teenagers or enter these years. And if you have a teen, it's certainly not too late to start to put any of this into practice. So grab Cathy's book, all her resources, go listen to the Zen Parenting Radio, learn from her because I certainly do. And I always learn so much. So thanks for being with us, Cathy.
Thanks, Michelle.